I was 72 when I discovered my strange gift. The ability came the same day my husband Tom passed away. The day I touched his favorite leather armchair and suddenly saw every moment he'd spent in it, like a movie playing before my eyes. Now I run this little antique shop, not for the money, but because sometimes objects remember what people need to forget, or what they desperately need to remember. The doctors called it grief-induced hallucinations at first. My daughter Meredith wanted me to see a psychiatrist. My son-in-law quietly researched retirement homes with excellent memory care units. But I knew what I was experiencing was real. I remember the first time it happened with someone else's possession. A young woman brought in her grandmother's pearl necklace to sell. Money troubles, she explained, not meeting my eyes. When I took the pearls in my hands, I gasped. I could see her grandmother wearing them on her wedding day, clasping them around her neck before the birth of each child, clutching them in prayer during hard times. 3 generations of women had drawn strength from these pearls. I can't accept these, I told her, pressing them back into her hands. They're not for sale. But I need the money, she insisted, her voice breaking. What you need more is courage, I said gently. Your grandmother wore these pearls when she left an abusive husband in 1962 with 2 small children and only $12 to her name. She wore them when she started her own business despite everyone saying a woman couldn't do it. These pearls don't belong in my shop. They belong with you, especially now. Her eyes widened. How could you possibly know that about my grandmother? I just smiled. When you've been around as long as I have, you develop intuition about these things. She left with the pearls still around her neck and a bewildered expression. 2 months later, she returned to thank me. She'd found the courage to start her own small business instead of staying in a job she hated. The pearls never left her neck during business meetings. That was when I realized what my gift was for. I didn't just see the history of objects. I saw the significance, the emotional resonance, the lessons embedded in them. And sometimes people needed those lessons more than they needed cash. So I transformed my late husband's antique hobby into something more. Eleanor's timeless treasures became my mission. The small storefront on Maple Street, with its perpetually dusty windows and creaking floorboards, became a place of subtle magic. I never advertised my ability, of course. As far as the town of Millfield knew, I was just a somewhat eccentric widow with a good eye for valuable antiques. Most days were quiet. I'd sit behind the counter with my cup of Earl Grey, glasses perched on the end of my nose, cataloging new acquisitions, or simply watching the dust motes dance in the beams of sunlight that streamed through the windows. Occasionally, tourists would wander in looking for quirky souvenirs. Sometimes local collectors would stop by hoping to find hidden treasures. But then there were the special visitors, the ones who came because they needed something they couldn't name. The universe has a way of guiding them to my door. Like Harold Peterson, who came in looking for a birthday gift for his wife, but left with a tarnished silver pocket compass that once belonged to a World War II navigator. The compass that would, months later, help him find his way back to himself when he got lost in grief after his wife's unexpected passing. Or like the teenage girl with angry eyes who stole a small music box, not realizing that its melody would be the one thing that could still reach her grandmother's mind, clouded by Alzheimer's. Each object in my shop has a story, a purpose, a destiny, and I've become their temporary guardian, waiting for the right person to claim them. Some folks think I'm just a sweet old lady selling dusty relics. They have no idea that I'm actually reuniting lost stories with the people who need to hear them most. And trust me, everyone needs to hear a story eventually. But little did I know that the very next day, A mysterious man would enter my shop and change everything I thought I knew about my gift.
The bell above my shop door jingled on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October. I looked up from my inventory book to see a man in his 40s, soaking wet, looking lost in more ways than one. His eyes darted around the cluttered shop with a mixture of desperation and skepticism. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, setting down my pen. "I don't know," he admitted with a self-conscious laugh. "My therapist actually suggested I come here, said you might have something I need." Interesting. Dr. Melissa Chen had started sending her patients my way occasionally, though we never explicitly discussed why. She was perceptive enough to sense something special about my shop, but professional enough not to pry. "Well, why don't you look around? Sometimes the right object finds you rather than the other way around." I gestured to the shelves crowded with history. "I'm Eleanor, by the way." "Daniel," he offered, then began wandering between the display cases, hands in his pockets, careful not to touch anything. I watched him circle the shop twice, looking increasingly frustrated. Nothing was calling to him. Or rather, he wasn't listening. Some people have walls up so high that even the loudest whispers from the past can't get through. "Maybe this was a mistake," he muttered, turning toward the door. That's when I noticed a subtle glow coming from a wooden box on the top shelf behind the counter, something only I could see. The objects that need to find someone tend to signal me this way. "Wait," I called out. "I think I might have something after all." I climbed onto my stepping stool and carefully brought down the carved wooden box. It had come in just last week, part of an estate sale from old Mrs. Winters, who had passed away at 97. I hadn't even had a chance to open it properly yet. "What is it?" Daniel asked, approaching the counter with reluctant curiosity. "Let's find out together," I suggested, unlatching the small brass hook. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a firefighter's badge, tarnished with age but still bearing a clear number, 27. The moment my fingers touched it, the visions came flooding in. A young man in the 1970s, rushing into burning buildings, the weight of responsibility, the thrill of saving lives, the camaraderie of the firehouse, but also deep, consuming guilt over the ones he couldn't save. "This belonged to James Winters," I said quietly. "He was a firefighter with the Millfield Department for nearly 30 years. Daniel's face went completely white. He reached out with trembling fingers, not quite touching the badge. "Station 27. That's the station house that burned down in 1978. My father was there. He didn't make it out." Now I understood why the badge had called to him. "James Winters was there too," I said gently. "He was the one who carried your father's body out, who tried to resuscitate him until the paramedics had to pull him away." "How could you possibly know that?" Daniel's voice was barely audible. I smiled softly. "The objects in this shop have ways of sharing their stories with me. This badge carried both tremendous pride and tremendous grief. James Winters never forgave himself for not being able to save your father." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "My mother always said a firefighter tried to save him, but I never knew who. I've spent my whole life angry that my father chose to run into that building instead of coming home to us." I held out the badge. "Perhaps it's time you held a piece of that day, to understand it better." He hesitated before taking it, and when he did, I saw his shoulders relax slightly, as if some invisible burden had begun to shift. "How much?" he asked, not taking his eyes off the badge. "It's not for sale," I told him, "but it is yours now. James would want you to have it." Daniel looked up, confusion crossing his features. "Why would you give this to me?" "Because objects like these need to complete their journey. This badge has been waiting for you for a long time." As he left the shop, badge carefully tucked in his pocket, I knew he would return. The healing had only just begun, but at least now he had a tangible connection to the father he'd lost. Sometimes that's all we need to start finding our way back to forgiveness, both of others and ourselves. That's the thing about antiques. They're not just old things. They're vessels of experience, carriers of emotion, tangible connections to moments that shaped us. In the right hands, they can heal wounds we thought would pain us forever, but sometimes they can also reveal secrets that were meant to stay buried, as I would soon discover.
The next morning, I arrived at my shop earlier than usual. A light fog had settled over Millfield, wrapping the old buildings of Main Street in a soft, dreamlike haze. These were my favorite mornings, when the world felt suspended between yesterday and today, much like the treasures in my shop. I was arranging a new collection of vintage perfume bottles in the front window when I noticed a woman watching me from the sidewalk. She was elegantly dressed in a tailored pantsuit, her silver hair cut in a sharp bob that framed a face lined with both authority and uncertainty. Not my usual customer. When our eyes met, she straightened her shoulders and pushed open my door with determination. "I'm looking for Eleanor Bennett," she announced. "You found her," I replied, stepping down from my window display perch. "Welcome to Timeless Treasures." "I'm Margaret Winters," she said, extending a manicured hand. "My mother passed away recently, and I believe you purchased some items from her estate." "Ah, that explained it. Yes, I did. I'm sorry for your loss. Your mother had some beautiful pieces, including my father's firefighter badge," she said tightly. "I've come to buy it back." I hesitated. "I'm afraid that's no longer possible. The badge has already found its new owner." Her composed expression cracked. "You sold it? Already? To whom?" "I can't divulge that information, but I can assure you it went to someone with a deep connection to it, someone who needed it." "Needed it?" She gave a bitter laugh. "It's a family heirloom, Mrs. Bennett. It belongs with family. I'll pay double whatever you sold it for." I gestured to the small sitting area near the back of the shop, where I occasionally served tea to visitors who needed more than just an antique. "Why don't we sit down? I think there's more to this story than a family heirloom." Reluctantly, she followed me. Once seated in the worn velvet armchair across from mine, some of her rigid posture softened. "The badge was important to your father, but it also carried his deepest regret." Margaret's eyes widened slightly. "How would you know that?" "The objects people cherish most absorb pieces of their stories," I said simply. "Your father never forgave himself for not being able to save his fellow firefighter in the station house fire." "Lieutenant Miller," she whispered. "My father had nightmares about that fire for years. He'd wake up shouting Miller's name." I nodded. "The badge now belongs to Lieutenant Miller's son." Margaret stared at me, momentarily speechless. "Daniel Miller? He's still in Millfield?" "He moved back recently. He's carried his own burden about his father's death. The badge is helping him understand his father's choice and your father's courage." She was quiet for a long moment, absently tracing the pattern on the armchair. "Dad never talked about it with us. Mom said he visited Mrs. Miller every month for years, though. Brought groceries, fixed things around her house." "Your father was a good man who couldn't save everyone," I said softly. "That badge carried both his pride and his pain. Now it's helping Daniel make peace with his past." Margaret's eyes glistened. "I was so busy arranging the estate sale, I never really looked at what I was giving away. There were just so many things." Her voice trailed off. I reached beneath the counter and pulled out the wooden box that had contained the badge. "The box is still here. Your father carved it himself. The inside is lined with a piece of his first uniform." She took it with reverent hands, running her fingers over the intricate pattern her father had etched into the wood.
"I remember him working on this," she murmured. "He'd sit at the kitchen table for hours carving after dinner. Perhaps you and Daniel Miller might meet someday. You both have pieces of the same story." Margaret nodded slowly, then stood to leave, the box clutched carefully against her chest. At the door, she turned back. "My mother always said there was something special about this shop, that you had a gift for knowing which things mattered and why." I smiled. "The objects tell me their stories. I just listen." After she left, I sat in the quiet shop, thinking about how objects connect us across time, how a simple badge could bridge the lives of two families, help heal wounds decades old. That's the true value of the treasures I keep, not their price tag, but their power to carry meaning from one heart to another, to help us understand ourselves and each other just a little better. The antiques in my shop may be fragile, worn by time and use, but the stories they contain are resilient. They endure, waiting patiently to be discovered by the right person at the right moment. Just like the silver locket I could feel beginning to warm on the shelf behind me, ready for whoever would walk through my door next. I never imagined it would lead me to the most unexpected apprentice. The silver locket continued to call to me throughout the afternoon, its presence growing more insistent as the day wore on. By closing time, I knew tomorrow would bring the person who needed it. That's how it often worked. The objects would start to signal me shortly before their intended owners appeared. I locked up the shop and headed home to my small apartment above Miller's Bakery, just 3 blocks away. My evening routine was simple: a light dinner, some reading, perhaps a phone call with Meredith or my grandson Ethan, who was away at college. Tonight, though, I found myself drawn to the cedar chest at the foot of my bed, the one place I kept objects too personal to sell. They were the items that had belonged to Tom and me, carrying our private history. From beneath layers of memories, I pulled out a small, weathered journal, Tom's fishing diary. He'd meticulously recorded every fishing trip for 40 years, the weather, the catch, the quiet observations of nature that had made him happiest. Toward the end, when his hands grew too shaky to write, I'd become his scribe, taking dictation of his thoughts as we sat by the lake. The last entry was dated just 2 weeks before his heart attack. "Eleanor spotted a blue heron today. Says it's good luck. Don't need luck when I've had her beside me for 47 years. I smiled through the familiar ache. Tom had been gone for 3 years now, but some grief never fully fades. It just becomes a companion you learn to live with. As I carefully returned the journal to the chest, my phone rang. Meredith, checking in as she did every Tuesday. "How's the shop, Mom?" she asked after our usual exchange of pleasantries. "Busy in the ways that matter. I helped Daniel Miller yesterday." The firefighter's son? The one who moved back to care for his mother? Meredith had grown up in Millfield and kept track of the town's happenings despite having moved to Boston 20 years ago. Yes, he found something of his father's, or rather, it found him. Meredith sighed. "Mom, you talk about these objects like they're alive." "In some ways they are," I said simply. "They carry energy, memories." Dr. Reeves said these attachments to objects might be your way of processing grief, that focusing on other people's emotional connections to antiques helps you manage your own loss. I smiled at my daughter's concern. And what if Dr. Reeves is right? Is helping others through my attachments such a terrible way to spend my widowhood? I just worry about you alone in that cluttered shop, imagining stories about dusty old things. I'm not imagining them, dear. I'm experiencing them. I decided to change the subject. How's Jeremy's new job going? We chatted about my son-in-law's promotion, my grandson's college adventures, and Meredith's garden plans for spring. After we hung up, I returned to the living room window that overlooked Main Street. The town was quiet now, streetlights casting pools of amber on the empty sidewalks. Meredith meant well, but she couldn't understand my gift. How could she? I barely understood it myself. All I knew was that since Tom's passing, objects spoke to me in ways they never had before, showing me their histories, their emotional significance, guiding me to connect them with the people who needed their particular stories. The next morning, the silver locket practically hummed with energy when I unlocked the shop. I took it from its display case, feeling its vibration against my palm as I held it up to the light. It was Victorian, intricately engraved with forget-me-nots, and contained a tiny, faded photograph of a young woman. When the door chimed at precisely 10:17, I wasn't surprised to see a teenage girl enter, her posture defensive, eyes wary beneath a fringe of purple hair. She pretended to browse, but I could tell she was taking inventory of the shop's security measures, or lack thereof. "The locket you're planning to steal is right here," I called out, holding it up. "Would you like to see it properly before you take it?" She froze, her face flushing beneath her pale makeup. I understand, I said, gesturing her over. "It's all right. I'm not going to call the police. I just thought you might want to know what you're taking." Curiosity overcame her caution. She approached the counter, eyeing me suspiciously. "It belonged to a girl named Catherine," I told her, opening the locket to reveal the photograph. "She was about your age when this was taken, in 1887. "How do you know that?" the girl challenged. "The same way I know your name is Lily. The same way I know you've been sleeping at the bus station for 3 nights since you ran away from your foster home." Her eyes widened in alarm. "Are you some kind of cop?" "No," I assured her. "Just someone who notices things. Like how this locket has been waiting for you, specifically." "That's crazy," she scoffed, but her eyes remained fixed on the silver oval in my hand. "Catherine ran away too, not from a foster home, but from an arranged marriage to a man 3 times her age. She made it all the way from Boston to New York on her own, found work as a seamstress, and eventually opened her own dress shop. This locket was her good luck charm." I held it out to her. Sometimes we need to be reminded that running away isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a different one. Lily's hand trembled slightly as she took the locket. "How much?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "It's not for sale," I told her, "but I do have a proposition. My back room needs organizing, and I could use help with inventory. Room and board in the apartment upstairs, plus modest pay." She stared at me suspiciously again. "Why would you offer that to someone who was going to rob you?" I smiled. "Because sometimes people don't need to be caught. They need to be seen." As they left, the book carefully wrapped and paid for despite my attempts to give it as a gift, Lily sidled up beside me. "That was her grandmother's actual book, wasn't it?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "The universe works in mysterious ways." But even I couldn't have predicted just how mysterious those ways would become, or how a simple wooden box waiting in my storage room would soon test us both in ways we never imagined. Lily stayed. Not immediately. First, she ran off with the locket, as I knew she would, but 3 days later she returned, thin and exhausted, the silver oval still clutched in her hand. "Your offer still stand?" she asked, trying to sound casual despite the hunger in her eyes. "It does," I said, holding the door open wider. "The kettle's just spoiled." That was 6 months ago. Now Lily lives in what used to be my storage room upstairs, which we converted into a small but comfortable bedroom. She's enrolled in the GED program at the community center and works in my shop after school. Her purple hair has grown out to reveal its natural honey brown, though she keeps the tips dyed teal now, so I don't forget who I am, she explains. This morning, as we unpacked a new shipment of vintage books, Lily held up a weathered copy of The Secret Garden. "This one's buzzing," she said matter-of-factly. I looked up in surprise. "Buzzing?" "Yeah, you know." She wiggled her fingers. "Like when something needs to go to someone specific. It's doing that thing." I carefully took the book from her hands. She was right. It hung with purpose, with a story waiting to be continued. But more surprising was Lily's casual acknowledgement of sensing it. "How long have you been able to feel that?" I asked. She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "A couple months, maybe?" At first I thought it was just like static electricity or something, but then I noticed it only happens with certain things, and then those are always the ones you end up giving to people who come in. I set the book aside, momentarily speechless. In 3 years, I'd never encountered anyone else who could sense what I did, not even Meredith, my own daughter. "Does that freak you out?" Lily asked, suddenly vulnerable. "No," I assured her quickly. "It's just unexpected. This awareness started for me after my husband passed away. I've never met anyone else who could feel it. Is that why you took me in? Because you knew I could do it too?" I shook my head. "I took you in because you needed a safe place and because Catherine's locket chose you. The rest is just a remarkable coincidence. Or perhaps not a coincidence at all. Perhaps some gifts need to be passed on, and the universe has its own way of arranging the proper succession." The bell above the door interrupted my thoughts. A hurried-looking woman in her 30s entered, a small boy clinging to her hand. His other arm was in a cast decorated with superhero stickers. "Welcome to Timeless Treasures," I greeted them. "How can we help you today?" "We're just browsing," she said distractedly. "Jaden's been begging to see the old stuff shop since we drove past yesterday." The boy, perhaps 7 or 8, gazed around with undisguised wonder. "Do you have any pirate treasure?" he asked hopefully. Lily grinned. "Not at the moment, but we have some pretty cool old coins. Want to see?" As she led him to the display case, I noticed the copy of The Secret Garden was now glowing softly, visible only to me, and perhaps to Lily. I picked it up again, feeling its urgency. "Do you enjoy reading, by any chance?" I asked the mother, who had been anxiously checking her watch. "I used to," she sighed, "before divorce and single motherhood took over my life." "This book has been waiting for someone," I said, holding it out to her. "I believe it might be you." She took it reflexively, running her fingers over the embossed cover. "My grandmother used to read this to me," she whispered, surprising herself with the admission. "I'd almost forgotten." "It's about a girl who discovers a neglected garden and brings it back to life, about how growing things can heal us when we're broken." Something in her expression shifted, a small light kindling behind the exhaustion. "My new place has a tiny backyard. It's completely overgrown, but Jaden keeps asking if we can plant something." "Perhaps you should," I suggested. "Sometimes the things we think we don't have time for are exactly what gives us back our time." She opened the book, and a pressed flower, a violet, perfectly preserved, fell into her palm. Her eyes filled with tears. "My grandmother pressed violets in this very book. How could you possibly have the same copy?" "Objects find their way back to where they belong," I said simply. "That book has traveled a long journey to return to your family." As they left, the book carefully wrapped and paid for, despite my attempts to give it as a gift, Lily sidled up beside me. "That was her grandmother's actual book, wasn't it?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "The universe works in mysterious ways." "Is that what we're doing here? Helping the universe fix things?" I considered her question. I think we're helping people remember what they've forgotten about themselves, their resilience, their capacity for wonder, their connections to the past and future. The objects are just vehicles for memory. Lily fingered the silver locket she still wore around her neck. Like how this reminds me that running away can sometimes be running towards something better. I smiled at the young woman who was, in her own way, becoming the most precious treasure in my shop. Exactly like that. That evening, as we closed up the shop, I realized I needed to tell Lily more about the gift we shared, how to understand it, how to use it responsibly, because someday, perhaps sooner than I had expected, timeless treasures would need a new guardian of its stories. What I didn't know was a test of our abilities was about to arrive in the form of a trunk that held secrets even I wasn't prepared to face. The summer heat had settled over Millfield like a heavy blanket, turning my shop into a warm, drowsy haven of stillness. I'd placed electric fans in strategic corners, but they mostly succeeded in circulating the warm air rather than cooling it. Still, I didn't mind. The heat made the scents of old wood, leather-bound books, and beeswax polish more pronounced, the perfume of history. I was carefully cleaning a collection of antique fountain pens when the power went out. The sudden silence as the fans stopped was followed by distant groans up and down Main Street. Another brownout, the third this week. The aging electrical grid in our small town wasn't designed for everyone running air conditioning simultaneously. Perfect timing, Lily muttered, emerging from the back room with a box of inventory sheets. I just printed these out. We'll manage, I assured her, reaching for the battery-powered lantern I kept under the counter. Antiques were made for a world without electricity anyway. The soft glow of the lantern cast dramatic shadows across the shop, making the furniture look even more alive somehow. Lily set her paperwork aside and began lighting the hurricane lamps scattered throughout the space. Soon the shop was illuminated by a warm, flickering light that felt appropriate for our treasures. "It's actually kind of nice," she admitted, settling on a Victorian fainting couch. "Like we're back in time." "Speaking of time," I said, "this might be a good opportunity for another lesson." Since discovering that Lily shared my ability to sense the stories in objects, I'd been teaching her how to refine this gift, how to listen more deeply, how to interpret what she felt. She was a quick study, her natural teenage intuition blending seamlessly with this newfound sensitivity. I brought over a simple wooden box containing various small items I'd collected for training purposes. Today, we'll practice discernment. Some objects carry strong stories, but aren't meant for anyone in particular. Others are waiting for a specific person. Learning to tell the difference is crucial. She nodded seriously, sitting up straighter. She'd embrace these lessons with unexpected dedication, as if finally finding something that explained her lifelong sense of not quite fitting in. I placed 5 items on the coffee table between us: a tarnished thimble, a man's pocket watch, a delicate handkerchief embroidered with lilies of the valley, a small tin soldier, and a smooth river stone with a natural hole through the center. "Close your eyes," I instructed. "Hover your hand over each object without touching it. Tell me what you feel." She did as instructed, her face a mask of concentration as her hand moved slowly above each item. "The thimble feels content, like it's completed its purpose. The watch is anxious. It feels like it's still waiting for something important." "Good," I encouraged. "Continue." "The handkerchief is sad, deeply sad. The toy soldier is protective, and the stone is peaceful, but also, I don't know how to describe it, like it's gathering energy for something." I smiled, impressed with her progress. "Now, which ones are waiting for a specific person to find them?"
Without hesitation, she pointed to the watch and the stone. These two, the others have stories, but they're not actively seeking anyone. Exactly right, I confirmed. The watch belonged to a young man who died in World War I before he could give it to his younger brother as promised. It's been trying to find its way to that brother's descendants ever since. And the stone is a hag stone. Folklore says looking through the natural hole allows you to see fairy realms. This particular one was used by a medicine woman in the 1700s and still carries her healing intentions. Lily picked up the stone, peering through its hole. "I don't see any fairies," she said with a half smile. "Perhaps they don't want to be seen today," I replied lightly. "The point is you correctly identified which objects are still on active journeys and which ones are simply carrying their histories more passively." The lights flickered briefly, then came back on. The modern world reasserting itself, fans whirring back to life. "There's something I've been wondering," Lily said, carefully repacking our lesson materials. "If we can sense which objects need to go to which people, can we sense which people need which objects? Like, if someone walks in the shop, can you tell what they're looking for before they even know?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "It's harder with people because they often hide their true needs, even to themselves. Objects are more honest. They contain exactly what they've experienced, no more, no less." Lily considered this. "So that's why you didn't call the cops when I was going to steal from you. You could tell what I really needed was not to be arrested. What you needed was to be seen, to be recognized as more than just your circumstances." She fingered the locket that still hung around her neck. "I'm going to try contacting my mom again," she said suddenly. I think maybe I'm ready." I nodded, understanding the significance of this decision. Lily had run away from her last foster home after learning her mother had been released from prison, but hadn't come looking for her. The hurt had been too overwhelming to process. Sometimes people are like these objects. They carry painful histories that make it hard for them to connect. But that doesn't mean their story is over. Lily's eyes glistened in the mixed light of electricity and lamplight. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" I smiled. "I've had many years of practice listening to the stories objects tell. People aren't so different. We all carry our histories with us, waiting for someone who cares enough to understand what we've been through and where we hope to go." The bell above the door jingled, announcing our first customer since the power outage. As Lily moved to help them, I carefully repacked our lesson materials, thinking about how some treasures can't be displayed in a shop window or sold over a counter. The most valuable antique in my possession wasn't any object at all. It was this chance to pass on not just my gift, but the wisdom to use it well. But the true test of that wisdom was about to arrive in a way that would shake us both to our cores.
The autumn leaves danced outside my shop window, golden and crimson messengers announcing the change of seasons. Inside, Lily and I were rearranging displays for the upcoming holiday season, bringing out the vintage Christmas ornaments, Art Deco cocktail sets, and Victorian card holders that always sold well as the year drew to a close. "Eleanor," Lily called from the storage room, "there's something weird about this box." I made my way to the back where she stood beside a weathered steamer trunk I'd purchased at an estate auction last spring. I'd never opened it, which was unusual for me. Somehow it had always seemed like the right time hadn't yet arrived. "It's not letting me open it," Lily explained, jiggling the tarnished brass latch, "and it feels, I don't know, reluctant?" I placed my hand on the trunk's curved lid, immediately understanding what she meant. Unlike most objects that either welcomed interaction or remained neutral, this trunk had a distinct feeling of resistance, as if it weren't quite ready to reveal its contents. "You're right," I confirmed. "It's not time yet." Not time for what? Lily asked, her curiosity piqued. What's inside it? I don't know, I admitted. This is the Hargrove trunk. It came from the estate of Judge William Hargrove after he passed last year at 96. The judge who sentenced my mom? Lily said quietly. I nodded, watching her face carefully. Judge Hargrove had been known for his strict sentencing, particularly in drug cases. He'd given Lily's mom 8 years for possession with intent to distribute, a sentence many in the community had felt was excessive for a first-time offender. I didn't make the connection until now, I said gently. Perhaps that's why the trunk is responding to your presence. Lily took a step back, her expression hardening. I don't want anything to do with that man's stuff. He destroyed my family. Or, perhaps, I suggested carefully, the trunk contains something that might help you understand why he made the decisions he did. She shook her head firmly. I don't care why. My mom missed my entire childhood because of him. She got out of prison a stranger who didn't know how to be a mom anymore. I didn't press the issue. The trunk would wait until the time was right, until Lily was ready to face whatever history it contained. Objects have their own sense of timing, their own wisdom about when their story should be revealed. Let's finish the holiday display, I suggested instead, guiding her back to the front of the shop. We worked in companionable silence for a while, arranging antique nutcrackers and delicate glass ornaments. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor as the day began its early winter descent toward evening. The bell above the door chimed, and we both looked up to see Dr. Melissa Chin, the therapist who occasionally referred her patients to my shop. Today, however, she wasn't accompanied by a client. She looked troubled, her usual calm demeanor strained around the edges. Eleanor, she greeted me with a tight smile. Lily, I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, I assured her. We were just setting up for the holiday rush. What brings you by? Dr. Chan glanced at Lily, then back to me. I was hoping to speak with you privately for a moment. Understanding this was a professional matter, Lily excused herself to continue unpacking ornaments in the back room, though not without a curious backward glance. What can I help you with? I asked once we were alone. Dr. Chen lowered her voice. I have a patient, a difficult case, a veteran with severe PTSD who's not responding to traditional therapy. He's isolated himself, refuses medication, barely speaks during our sessions. He hesitated. I know this is unorthodox, Eleanor, but I've seen how your intuition about objects has helped other patients of mine. I was wondering if you might have something that could reach him when my words can't. I considered her request carefully. What she was asking went beyond my usual practice of letting people find what they needed in my shop. She wanted me to actively select an object for therapeutic purposes, to use my gift in a more direct way than I typically allowed myself. I don't know, I said honestly. The connections usually form organically. I've never tried to engineer one. I understand, she said, disappointment evident in her voice. It was worth asking. I'm afraid we're running out of options, and his family is desperate. As she turned to leave, I felt a familiar warmth emanating from the corner cabinet where I kept smaller military items, medals, insignia, dog tags. Something there was responding to our conversation. Wait, I called. What branch did he serve in? Marines, she said. 2 tours in Afghanistan. I walked to the cabinet and opened it, letting my hand hover over the contents until I felt a distinct pull toward a tarnished metal Zippo lighter with the Marine Corps emblem engraved on one side. When I picked it up, the visions came immediately. Desert heat, the weight of body armor, the camaraderie that made the unbearable bearable. This belonged to a Marine sergeant in Vietnam. His unit was pinned down for 3 days under heavy fire. This lighter was passed among the men as they waited, each one using it to light a cigarette, telling stories to keep fear by bay. All 8 of them survived when no one thought they would. I placed it carefully in her hand. It carries resilience and brotherhood. Not a cure, but perhaps a beginning. Dr. Chen examined the lighter with a mix of professional skepticism and hopeful curiosity. How do I explain where it came from? Say you found it at an antique shop and something about it made you think of him. The object will do the rest. After she left, Lily emerged from the back room. "Was that about the judge's trunk?" she asked. "No," I assured her, "just another person looking for a piece of the past to help make sense of the present. Just like that trunk will someday help someone understand their story better." Lily's eyes followed mine. "You think it's meant for me, don't you?" "I think," I said carefully, "that objects find their way to the people who need them when they need them, not before, not after." She nodded slowly, a thoughtful expression replacing her earlier resistance. "Like Catherine's locket found me." "Exactly like that." Later that evening, as we closed the shop, the setting sun cast one final ray through the front window, illuminating the steamer trunk in the back room with a golden glow, visible to both of us from where we stood. Neither of us mentioned it, but I saw Lily watching it with a mixture of apprehension and reluctant curiosity. Some treasures reveal themselves in their own time. The best we can do is be ready to receive their stories when they're finally told. But I never expected that the next chapter of my own story would begin with pain that would change everything.
December arrived with a light dusting of snow that transformed Millfield into a picture-perfect New England postcard. Tourists flocked to our small town for the annual winter festival, and my shop had been unusually busy with holiday shoppers seeking unique gifts with character and history. On a quiet Tuesday morning, as Lily and I enjoyed a rare lull between customers, the bell above the door announced a visitor. A woman in her 50s entered, stamping snow from her boots and unwinding a colorful scarf from around her neck. She had Lily's eyes, the same amber brown flecked with gold, and a hesitant smile that seemed unpracticed. "Mom?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. I stepped back, giving them space, as Sarah Mitchell crossed the shop floor with uncertain steps. She'd been released from prison over a year ago, but this was the first time she'd come looking for her daughter. "Lily," she said, her voice catching, "you look so grown up." The reunion was awkward, filled with halting conversation and long silences as mother and daughter retreated to the small sitting area in the corner of the shop. I busied myself with inventory, providing privacy while remaining nearby in case Lily needed support. Their voices drifted over occasionally, Sarah explaining how she'd finally gotten clean in prison, completed her GED, found steady work as a hospital custodian in a town 30 miles away. Lily, guarded at first, gradually warming as she shared selective details about her life at the shop, her progress toward her own GED, her plans for community college. Neither mentioned Judge Hargrove or the trunk that still sat unopened in our storage room. After an hour, Sarah rose to leave, promising to call and visit again if Lily wanted. They hugged briefly, a stiff embrace that held years of absence and hurt, but also a fragile hope. When the bell signaled Sarah's departure, Lily remained in the corner chair, staring out the window as her mother disappeared down the snowy street. "You okay?" I asked gently, bringing her a cup of hot chocolate from our small kitchenette. She nodded, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "She looks older than I remembered, smaller. Prison ages people, so does regret. She said she tried to find me when she got out, but I'd already run away from my last foster home by then. She's been saving money to get a bigger apartment so I could come live with her if I wanted." I felt a complicated knot of emotions, happiness for Lily's chance to reconnect with her mother, sadness at the prospect of losing her presence in the shop and my life, worry about whether Sarah Mitchell was truly stable enough to provide the home Lily deserved.
What do you think you'll do? I asked carefully. She looked up, surprised. I'm not going anywhere. At least, not until I finish high school and figure out what's next. She gave me a small smile. Besides, I still have a lot to learn about the shop, about our gift. Relief washed over me, followed by a twinge of guilt for feeling relieved. Your mother would understand if you wanted to be with her. I think, she hesitated, formulating her thoughts, I think we both need time. She's still figuring out who she is, without drugs, without prison walls. And I'm still figuring out who I am with this new ability to understand objects and help people. She twisted the silver locket around her neck, a habit when she was thinking deeply. Maybe we can build something new without having to live together right away. Her wisdom belied her 17 years, a maturity forced upon her by circumstance but shaped by her own remarkable resilience. Speaking of figuring things out, she said suddenly, setting down her mug, I want to open the trunk. I blinked in surprise. Judge Hargrove's trunk? Are you sure? She nodded, resolve firming her features. Seeing my mom made me realize something. I've been angry for so long, at her for using drugs, at the judge for the harsh sentence, at the foster care system for bouncing me around. But Mom's trying to move forward. Maybe I need to as well. I followed her to the storage room where the steamer trunk sat exactly as we'd left it weeks before. This time, when Lily placed her hand on the brass latch, it clicked open easily. Inside, carefully preserved in acid-free tissue paper, lay a collection of letters, hundreds of them, neatly bundled with twine, organized by year. On top sat a leather-bound journal with correspondence record embossed on the cover. Lily opened the journal with trembling fingers. Inside, in meticulous handwriting, was a log of letters sent to and received from former defendants Judge Hargrove had sentenced over his 40-year career. Each entry included the case number, the sentence given, and brief notes about the person's progress after release. He kept track of them, Lily whispered, flipping through pages. All of them. She found her mother's name in the more recent entries. Sarah Mitchell, case number 4872B. 8 years for possession with intent to distribute. First-time offender. Decision difficult but necessary considering quantity and proximity to school zone. Began correspondence in second year of sentence. He wrote to my mom in prison, and she wrote back? Together, we found the bundle of letters marked with Sarah's case number. With shaking hands, Lily untied the twine and opened the first letter, from the judge to her mother, dated 6 months after sentencing. Miss Mitchell, you may be surprised to receive correspondence from me. I write to all defendants whose cases have particularly affected me. Yours is one such case. While I stand by the sentence required by law, I recognize the impact on your daughter and wish to offer any assistance possible in maintaining your relationship with her during your incarceration. Lily read through letter after letter, the judge offering resources for prison education programs, Sarah's initial angry responses gradually evolving into reluctant engagement, updates on her progress, the judge's encouragement, and eventually his help in connecting her with re-entry programs and potential employers in neighboring counties. The final letter, dated just weeks before the judge's death, read, Sarah, I am proud of the work you have done to rebuild your life. While I cannot undo the years you lost with Lily, I hope my efforts have in some small way helped create the possibility for a future relationship. My time is growing short, but my faith in your continued recovery remains strong. Judge William Hargrove. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she carefully returned the letters to their bundle. He was trying to help all along, in his own way. People are complex. Even those who cause us pain often believe they're doing what's necessary or right. Do you think my mom knew the trunk was here? Is that why she came today? I shook my head. I think some connections transcend our understanding. Your mother came today because it was time. The trunk opened today for the same reason. Lily wiped her eyes, a new understanding settling into her expression. That's what this is all about, isn't it? The shop, the objects, your gift, our gift. It's about finding the missing pieces that help us make sense of our stories. I smiled, deeply moved by her insight. That's exactly what it is, Lily. That's exactly what we do. As we carefully repacked the trunk, which would remain in the shop but would no longer feel like an unwelcome presence, I realized that the most precious antiques weren't the ones with the highest price tags or the most impressive provenance. They were the ones that bridged understanding, that healed old wounds, that completed broken circles of human connection. I had no idea then that my own circle was about to be broken in a way that would test everything I believed about my shop and its purpose.
April arrived with a riot of daffodils and cherry blossoms, turning Millfield into a canvas of pastels and fresh greens. The shop windows were open to catch the spring breeze, and I'd placed vases of flowers throughout the store, a tradition Tom and I had started decades ago to celebrate winter's end. Lily was at school, working hard to complete her GED requirements. She'd settled into a new rhythm of life, weekends and afternoons at the shop with me, Wednesday evenings and Sunday lunches with her mother, who had remained true to her promises of staying in touch. Their relationship was still tender, a delicate rebuilding, but genuine progress was being made day by day. I was polishing a set of Art Deco cocktail glasses when a sharp pain shot through my left arm, radiating up to my jaw. The glass I was holding slipped from my fingers, shattering on the hardwood floor as I clutched the edge of the counter for support. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead, and the room seemed to tilt sideways. Heart attack. The realization was calm, almost detached, the same way Tom had described his own symptoms 3 years earlier. I fumbled for the phone, managing to dial 911 before sinking to the floor behind the counter. "Timeless Treasures Antiques," I told the dispatcher, my voice surprisingly steady. "I'm alone in the shop." The next hours passed in a blur of sirens, efficient paramedics, bright hospital lights, and concerned medical personnel. By evening, I was stabilized in the cardiac unit, a stent placed in one of my coronary arteries, my condition listed as serious but stable. Meredith arrived from Boston, her face tight with worry as she took up position beside my hospital bed. "Mom, why didn't you call me when you started feeling bad?" "It happened rather suddenly," I explained, patting her hand. "Besides, there wouldn't have been time for you to get here." "That's not the point," she said, her voice breaking. "I should have been here. I shouldn't have to find out my mother had a heart attack from a teenage girl I barely know." "Ah, so she'd met Lily." "She's a remarkable young woman," I said. "She's been a tremendous help in the shop." Meredith's expression softened slightly. "She certainly seems devoted to you. She was here for hours before I arrived, only leaving for school when I promised to call with any changes." She hesitated. "She told me about her abilities, that she can sense things from objects like you do." I raised an eyebrow, surprised that Lily had shared our secret. "And what do you think about that?" "I think," Meredith said carefully, "that I've spent 3 years dismissing something important to you as grief-induced fantasy. And while I still don't fully understand it, Lily's conviction made me wonder if perhaps I've been too quick to judge." It was as close to acceptance as Meredith had ever come regarding my gift. I squeezed her hand, too moved to speak for a moment. "The doctors say you'll need several weeks of recovery," she continued, switching to practical matters. "I've arranged to work remotely for a while so I can stay and help." "That's not necessary. I'll be fine on my own." "You will not be fine on your own," Meredith insisted firmly. "You've had a heart attack, Mom. You need care and supervision. And the shop will need to be closed." "Absolutely not," I interrupted. "Timeless Treasures hasn't closed a single day since I opened it, except for Christmas and Easter." "Mom, be reasonable. You can't possibly manage the shop while recovering." The door opened before I could argue further, revealing Lily with a small potted plant and a determined expression. "She won't have to manage alone," Lily announced, having clearly overheard.
I can run the shop while Eleanor recovers." Meredith turned, skepticism written across her features. "You're a teenager." "I'm 18 next month," Lily countered. "I've been working there for almost a year. I know the inventory, the pricing, the computer system, and most of the regular customers." She set the plant on my bedside table. "More importantly, I know which objects need special handling and which customers need particular attention." I could see Meredith wavering between practical concerns and reluctant acknowledgement of Lily's capability. "It would only be for the hours after school and weekends, and if you're staying in town, you could be there for the morning shift." "A compromise," I suggested, seeing an opportunity to bridge these two important parts of my life. They exchanged evaluating looks, my daughter and my protege, so different yet connected by their concern for me. "Fine," Meredith conceded, "but only if you promise to actually rest and recover, Mom. No sneaking to the shop when we're not looking." Cross my heart, I promised, making the childish gesture that had always sealed our most serious agreements when Meredith was small. For the next few weeks, confined first to the hospital and then to my apartment, I received daily updates from both women. To my surprise, they developed an efficient working relationship that gradually evolved into something like friendship. Meredith's organizational skills complemented Lily's intuitive understanding of the shop's special purpose. Between them, Timeless Treasures not only remained open, but actually thrived. Lily kept me informed about the special objects that called out for particular customers, the vintage baseball glove that helped a grieving father connect with his son's memory, the antique music box that soothed an elderly woman with dementia when nothing else could reach her. Meredith, to my amazement, began to accept these stories without her usual skepticism, witnessing firsthand the coincidences that brought certain people to certain objects at exactly the right moment. 6 weeks after my heart attack, deemed sufficiently recovered by my doctors, I returned to the shop on a glorious May morning. Stepping through the familiar door, breathing in the beloved scent of history and polished wood, I felt a profound sense of homecoming, and also something new. The shop felt, however, more alive, more purposeful, as if my absence had allowed it to reveal more of its true nature to Meredith and Lily. They had created a small welcome-back celebration, complete with tea and scones from the bakery downstairs. As the three of us sat together in the sitting area, surrounded by objects that had witnessed decades, centuries of human experience, I realized that Timeless Treasures had always been about more than just the past. It was about connecting threads across time, linking forgotten stories to people who needed them, preserving the continuity of human experience across generations. But the true test of what we'd built together was waiting just around the corner.
1 year later, I stood in the center of Timeless Treasures, surveying the shop with a mixture of pride and nostalgia. The morning sunlight streamed through freshly cleaned windows, illuminating the antiques that had been my companions for so long. Everything gleamed with polish and care, Meredith's doing. She had insisted on a thorough spring cleaning before the day's special event. "All set in the back room," Lily announced, emerging with a tray of cucumber sandwiches. At 19, she had blossomed into a confident young woman, her previous wariness replaced by a grounded sense of purpose. Her GED completed, she was now taking business courses at the community college while continuing to work at the shop. "Mom called," Meredith added, adjusting a display of vintage hat pins. "She's picking up the cake and will be here in 20 minutes. At 45, my daughter had softened considerably over the past year. Working in the shop part-time had connected her to something she hadn't even known she was missing, a sense of continuity, of being part of something larger than her individual life. Today marked the official signing of the papers that would transform Timeless Treasures into a family business, with Meredith, Lily, and myself as equal partners. My heart attack had been a powerful reminder of mortality, pushing me to ensure the shop's future beyond my own. The bell above the door chimed, and Dr. Melissa Chen entered, bearing a potted orchid. "Happy Partnership Day," she greeted us warmly. Over the past year, our professional relationship had evolved into friendship. After witnessing the impact of carefully chosen objects on several of her patients, she had become a believer in the shop's special purpose. We now collaborated regularly, her psychological training complementing our intuitive understanding of which objects might help particular individuals heal from trauma or loss. "Is he coming?" she asked quietly, setting down the orchid. I nodded. He confirmed yesterday. The he in question was Daniel Miller, the firefighter's son who had received his father's badge from my shop over a year ago. That connection had started a remarkable chain of healing throughout Millfield. Daniel had eventually met with Margaret Winters, the daughter of the firefighter who had tried to save his father. Their conversation had led to a community initiative to honor the men lost in the station house fire with a memorial that celebrated their courage rather than just marking their loss. More guests arrived. Sarah Mitchell, Lily's mother, now 2 years sober and recently promoted to supervisor of environmental services at the hospital. Harold Peterson, whose wife's passing had been eased by the World War II compass he'd found in our shop. The young woman who had kept her grandmother's pearls and now runs a successful small business. Each person carried a dish for the potluck celebration, but more importantly, each carried a story that had been touched in some way by an object from Timeless Treasures. As the shop filled with conversation and laughter, I found myself momentarily overwhelmed by the tapestry of connections visible before me. Lives intersecting, wounds healing, new possibilities emerging from encounters with the past. "You've created something remarkable here," a voice said beside me. I turned to find Daniel Miller, badge pinned proudly to his jacket. "Not created," I corrected gently. "Discovered, perhaps, or remembered." He nodded in understanding. "Either way, this town is better for it." After everyone had eaten and the partnership papers had been signed to a round of applause, Lily tapped a spoon against her glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," she announced, "to Eleanor, who taught me that objects aren't just things, they're vessels of experience, carriers of memory, bridges between people who might otherwise never connect." "To Eleanor," everyone echoed, raising their glasses. "And," Meredith added, "to Timeless Treasures, which will continue connecting people to the stories they need for many years to come." Later, as the gathering wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself alone in the back room for a moment. I ran my fingers over the spines of leather-bound ledgers, the smooth wood of an antique rocking horse, the cool surface of a marble bust, each one humming with history, with lives lived and remembered. I thought about how my own strange gift appeared after Tom's death, how touching his favorite armchair somehow opened a door within me that had remained open ever since. Was it grief that had wakened this ability, or love? Perhaps they were two sides of the same profound human connection, neither possible without the other. "There you are," Lily said, poking her head into the room. "A woman just came in asking about Victorian mourning jewelry. I told her our resident expert would be right out." I smiled, returning to the present moment. On my way. As I moved to help the customer, I passed the front window where afternoon sun illuminated a new addition to the shop, a simple wooden plaque beside the register that read, "Every object has a story. Every story seeks a listener. Every listener becomes a keeper of memory. Welcome to Timeless Treasures, where the past is never truly gone, only waiting to be remembered." The words had been Lily's idea, Meredith's elegant phrasing, and my deep belief made visible. Together, we had created something that would outlast any individual life, a place where memories were preserved, where healing could happen, where the mysterious connections between people and the objects that carry their stories could be honored and understood. Some might call it magic, this ability to sense the histories embedded in antiques, but I've come to believe it's simply a more refined version of something we all possess, the capacity to recognize that we're connected across time by the objects we create, use, love, and pass on. The true gift isn't in seeing these connections, it's in helping others see them too. Every day, people walk through the door of timeless treasures looking for something old, but find instead something timeless. A reminder that we're all part of an unbroken chain of human experience, stretching backward into history and forward into possibility. And isn't that, after all, the most precious antique of all? This understanding that none of us exists in isolation, that our stories intertwine with countless others, that what we leave behind matters not for its monetary value, but for the meaning it carries forward. As I helped the customer select a mourning brooch that once helped a young widow find her way through grief, I caught Lily's eye across the shop. She nodded slightly, already sensing the connection forming between woman and object. Meredith, arranging a new display nearby, glanced over with her own understanding smile. This then was my true legacy, not the shop itself, not even the gifts I'd passed on, but the awareness that remembering is a form of love that transcends time. And love, unlike so many things in this world, never really becomes antique. It simply grows more valuable with age. But something tells me this is just the beginning of our story.